Yeah, so thank you very much for the introduction. So I might start. So just with a short introduction round, a few words. Maybe start with the ladies.
Hi, I'm Michelle. I work at Deloitte UK in the Artificial Intelligence Solutions Group and the Data Science team for Risk Analytics function. I lead the design, development, and sale of EMILIE chatbot at Deloitte.
I'm Jaycee. I'm CEO and co-founder of Avocado Bots. We do chatbots for conferences and events, and as well now for the health space.
All right, I'm Tom. I'm the head of engineering at Rasa, and we do a lot of open source development. So we develop a framework for building chatbots that are clever, right, using machine learning, data analysis, and really providing the tools for companies and developers to build clever chatbots.
I'm Markus Feigelbinder. I'm the co-founder and MD of FINEWAY AI. So actually we are a travel tech company focusing on providing a conversational service to plan and to book your trip.
So I'm going to help moderate, as in I have a list of questions in case we get stuck in our discussions. So I think what we're going to start with is our individual chatbots, since we all work at different companies. So could you give a brief description of the bot functionalities and use cases?
Okay, I'm going to start. So we don't do our own chatbots. We do projects with companies together using our framework. So we've been developing bots for large insurance companies like Ergo Insurance or banking companies like UBS. And all of these are either internal projects or projects that really are customer-facing, talking to the clients of banks or insurance.
For avocado bots right now for conferences and events. So on Slack for if you have questions about the schedule, like today, when is the panel on chatbots, or what is the Wi-Fi password, you can get those answers, as well as now applying that to the health space for scheduling for medication reminders and things like that.
So EMILIE at Deloitte is a chatbot leveraging cognitive APIs combined with custom code that allows for more flexible development. We've had use cases around kind of service desk doing stuff for you, to offering more of legal and regulatory and compliance related advice, to building a chatbot on top of a structured database to make accessing the information more seamless.
So what we actually do is building a travel bot, or we have built a travel bot, which I would say it's pretty different than a chatbot. But we are interacting with the customer via a bot, and that's why I'm sitting here. But what we actually do is building a conversational, and we really try to not just ping pong between a customer and a bot, trying to understand what he means. It's really guiding him with a conversation through a whole process of trip planning, and that's what we do actually.
Cool. So next question is, what is a key differentiator for your chatbot compared to other similar products? Do you want to start?
Just go ahead. So actually, I mentioned it before. So as of today, especially travel, there are, I would say, thousands and thousands of players trying to figuring out how to do the next customer journey thing with the client, with the travelers. And a lot of these chatbots, travel bots, whatever you call it, are actually focusing still on just doing a survey, a search and compare experience in a different way. So actually creating more work for the consumer, just asking a few questions, when to travel, where to travel, who wants to travel, something like that, but not providing, from our point of view, real value. It's really that we need to focusing on this part of the journey where we are guiding the customer to what's important for him, ask him the right questions with relevant answer options, and then guiding this conversation, building this conversation, and based on data points, build up a trip example, a trip proposal from the scratch, a complex trip proposal.
So for EMILIE, I think there are three key differentiators. One's the custom flexibility, because most chatbots have their own NLP engine, or they use a specific vendor and are partner with that vendor. The chatbot that we're building is vendor agnostic, so it can easily switch between IBM Watson, Amazon Lex, API.ai, and allows for a more modular and flexible design. And second is we have in-house experts at Deloitte who train the chatbots with their specific area of expertise. For example, we have a GDPR chatbot where our privacy team is embedding it with domain-specific knowledge and legal expertise. And we also have it synced with our own regulation database called ProAct, which helps you keep track of your compliance requirements. Yeah, that's it.
So avocado bots for conferences and events chatbots are the first that I've seen that are in that area, and for the medical space, working with doctors, so working with patients and doctors directly, so to make it the best use case possible.
Yeah, so as said, we don't develop only chatbots, but a whole framework to build them. So as API, or as it's now called Dialogflow or IBM Watson. And the goal for that framework is, and why we build it, is to really allow this multi-interaction dialogue that we've seen on the slides as well, so where the user tells you a bit of information, and then we want to reuse that information later in the dialogue to basically accomplish a goal, to guide the user, as you said, to like book a travel or a whole journey, and really keeping track of that information and foster the dialogue and ask the right questions and guide the dialogue in the right direction. That's what we're focusing on with our framework.
So we can talk briefly also about chatbot market and trends. So what are some of the key trends in the chatbot market, and how do you see the market developing over the next few years? Let's start with you.
Okay, and that is a really, really tricky and broad question. Yes, so there are a lot of tools out there, a lot of UI tools as well, right? Provided from Dialogflow, from Lewis, from Watson, IBM. But really, the focus now goes more into the direction of really having custom dialogue systems, having really applied machine learning algorithms, using Keras, using TensorFlow, really trying to build your chatbot for your use case, right? I mean, there are generic frameworks that you can just throw at a problem like Dialogflow and it magically works. But then usually in your use case, if you develop your bot further, you will encounter something that is specific to your problem or a bit of niche. And this is something that you cannot like handle with these frameworks. And I think we're now not there yet to have like these general applicative bots that you can just can handle everything, that you basically throw at a problem and they just work. We're not there yet in machine learning and data analysis, and yeah, this is why you need to customize your bot for your use case.
Yeah. For me, it's for conversational UI and having more designers for conversational UX and UI and really creating a process for that. Right now, there's a lot about bot personality and making the bot super deep machine learning, which is important. But a lot of the time, too, if you do a lot of user testing and getting users involved, for that use case, it could improve a lot. So I see a trend.
Yeah. So I agree that there will probably be more of like domain-specific chatbots that are experts in one field, and I think the key will be subject matter experts training it with the industry-specific jargon, like specific acronyms to one company, and then there will probably be more of like a seamless transition between chatbots to humans, but also chatbots to chatbots, moving from one topic to another. And I think because the ability to build these kinds of solutions are just getting cheaper with the availability of low-cost API, making the development much faster and much more efficient, I think we will definitely see a wider adoption of chatbot technology across domains.
Yeah, I totally agree. So I think in the last few years, actually 48 months, something like that, we have seen there are a lot of groundwork done. So they're amazing platforms. So I think they're super simple in what they can do until now, but it's important to just make it available to a huge platform of developers so that we can really have some creativity to see what's working out, how to interact, to try copies, something like that, to create personalities. I think that's something individuals or small companies are much better than just some enterprises. that's an important step, but I think the next step is really going in domain-specific chatbots, domain-specific bots, and they're fulfilling one very specific task, which is helpful for the customer and not really only be chatty. That's something which is fun, and as we have heard before, users actually have the tendency to just try to break it. That makes sense because there's not much they can do else. I think it's really having one task, and it really helps me doing that. So we're not there with all the different kind of assistants, voice assistants like Alexa or something like that. It's still very toy, but that's, I think, the next evolution, and for Rasa or others, really going there, helping make them at some level smart, and I think you can only get smart at one field at a point in time.
And the next question is more around the technology. What are some of the machine learning AI tools or techniques that you're using?
Well, it's easy. So for us, it really is Rasa as a framework to build chatbots, right? It abstracts a bit away the machine learning, so you can get started as a developer building a chatbot without knowing the machine learning. But then when you want to customize that, it is easy to do that, right? So you can just use a different model. The default model is an LSTM, for example, and you just can plug in, let's say, sklearn and use an SVM instead, for example, if you know what you do, right? So for us, it's really having this abstraction of Rasa and then using the underlying technologies of Keras, of TensorFlow, and all the possibilities we get through them.
So I guess for EMILIE, it's quite similar in that we're not building our own NLP engine, unlike Rasa, but we have the orchestration layer and the abstraction on top of it that makes building new chatbots on use cases easier. So we have our own, you can have a drop down and choose between, I want to use IBM Watson, I want to use Alexa, I want to use API.ai, Rasa, and that allows you to be more flexible in the pricing and the type of technology that's the best for your use case, etc. And we also have custom-built user interfaces that you can use to build simple Q&A bots, modify any sort of intents, and we have subject matter expert training screens where you can crowdsource ideas from subject matter experts on how to answer a specific question.
Yeah, I think so. Also when I hear machine learning, AI, fancy terms like that, so on chatbot stuff, so actually it almost always is focusing on just on the first part, so actually just understanding what the customer means, what's the intent, sometimes sentiment, but it's really just doing NLP and related to NLP. Actually, that's what is really interesting is the next part, because NLP and stuff, that's a development field for the boys with the deep pockets and a lot of data. It's really interesting to also apply machine learning algorithms, stuff like that, and other statistical methods in the part to propose better, to have better algorithms and recommendations and fulfilling actually the task why the user started the chatbot. And there we're talking not enough at the moment. I think, again, Rasa is really going this direction, others are also doing this direction, but actually a lot of that stuff is done in-house. Also, we are actually focusing solely on doing machine learning just on the recommendation part. So better proposing trips and building up trips and really putting all the NLP stuff aside, doing a semantic bot and actually guiding. So we are guiding the conversation and the bot is guiding the conversation and not so focusing on just understanding what exactly the user meant when saying X or Y.
So next question's around chatbot design. So what is your UX process when building the bot? What tools and practices do you use to design the flow of the conversation?
So for us, we took a really big UX-driven approach when designing the bot. So first step, doing a lot of research, so surveys, getting users involved, doing interviews. Second step, figuring out from that research the pain points, really discovering what that user actually needs. Third, getting to the design, so in Sketch, actually creating the user flow. And then fourth, development, of course, and then testing always, so getting people in for user testing as you would with apps and websites. seeing where they're getting stuck and fixing those problems, and then launching, continuously iterating. Yeah, so we kind of built this process too on our own at Avocado Bots, because online there's, once again, too, so much on bot personality, but the UX for bots is kind of untouched, I think, still. There's so much more to learn. So yeah, but we try to make a big emphasis on that.
Yeah, so when we develop a larger bot for the company, they usually come with us with an idea. So we want to build that as customer service and helps the customer like change his profile details and ask certain questions, FAQ questions. And these are usually created by whiteboard sessions, right? So the large companies like gather in front of a whiteboard and then they come up with a cool dialogue they think works, and usually that's not the case. So the best thing to design the bots is to do user studies, right? If you don't have collected dialogues beforehand, right, because this is the first time you're implementing the bot, you don't have a chat before, what do you do, right? You gather a couple of users, even if it's just a couple of your friends, you give them a task, you give them an information, and then you just like do it in a Wizard of Oz style, right? So the user asks you something and you pretend to be the bot and ask and help him, right? And that way you find out how can the dialogue develop. And this will give you a first impression of which different dialogue stories are possible. How can the dialogue develop? And our framework actually allows you to like collect more and more of these so-called stories, and the framework then learns to like replicate these stories and learn from them and how to guide the dialogue through these different kind of user stories.
Yeah, I guess it's easier when the clients have already like a log of all the help desk dialogues they've had. It's not always the case, and for EMILIE, I think for the user interface we use a rapid application development software called OutSystems, and to just make it brand consistent and add in little widgets to facilitate the conversation. But overall, in terms of the dialogue design, we have process design subject matter experts who would sit down with the client and discuss how the customer or internal employee journey they want it to play out, and it usually ends up with one of us asking questions like, how would you answer this type of a question? They would say it depends, and what does it depend on, and kind of formalizing the logic of how they usually answer people's questions.
Yeah, I will be very honest. So I think UX actually on every kind of bot, it's, at least for us, I think the hardest part. It's really almost a mission impossible. So we have invested a lot of time. We have tried in the beginning, for some very simple prototyping, we used a platform and just tried to make a recruitment bot. So there is no machine learning or magic behind. It's just solely focusing on how to build a conversation, how to do the copy. And I would say in the first few iterations, we completely failed. Luckily, we never exposed it to anybody. It was a complete mess, so we tried with all the bot personalities. We did all the fancy exercises like what kind of actor we look like. Is it rather Obama or Kevin Spacey or whoever? So we really tried it all. It was a real mess. But then in the end, we decided not going for any very specific bot personality, but nevertheless, the copy was, unsurprisingly, the hardest part in the whole project. And that's actually, even though we're not focusing on the copy so much, or it's not that important for the current project we're doing, or for the current travel bot, as it is already data point based and not scripted, so that makes it a bit easier. So there's less copy relevance. It's still very important. That was actually why we decided, okay, we need a conversational designer and we need to listen to a lot of scripts. So that's why we have a commodity business in place. So we have our commodity business, FINEWAY.de, is actually a tour operator, and there we have each week hundreds of calls with clients, with travelers, and talking to them. Our travel designers, real staff, they're talking to them. And so we have a very set of data, and learning from these interviews and consultancy briefings with the clients, with the travelers. We're learning how do we need to structure an interview going to South Africa for 10 days next spring, something like that. So literally I've heard, I think personally, hundreds of these calls. We have analyzed them, we have structured them, and out of that we have learned what are the important data points, how people like to structure that. Is it, even if it don't make sense to structure it completely different from a data point base, it might just make sense to have it in a different way because the clients like to do it that way, it's used to. I think that's also important from UX point of view, that people might change their perception over time, what is a good conversation, and how to answer to stuff, how they would like to something ask. So there's a lot of stuff going on. I think it's actually the hardest and one of the most interesting parts in conversational AI in general.
So that brings me nicely to my next question, which is what are some of the key learnings or best practices, and what are some of the key challenges?
So best practices is really, as you said, collecting data and analyzing data, because all your insights and how you develop your bot should be based on some like ground truth or source of data you use. Even if you just as that start out with a new bot, then really create a first prototyping version and then use that with real users and see how they communicate to the bot, to make design decisions about the dialogue, what you want to handle, what you don't want to handle, which questions you want to answer, which chit-chat examples you want to follow, right? What should your bot do if the user says, I love you, for example, because as we've heard earlier, really users try to break bots, and the question now is, what does your bot do in these cases? And really these examples of what people try out to do with your bot, this is like really just based on data and past dialogues. And then in terms of design, I think really take into account what is possible on the platform you use for deploying your bot, right? So on Facebook, for example, you not only have like a text interface, but you also are able to post images, post buttons, post links, right? To create like a more interactive experience for the user that is not just text-based, like really sending them to other pages, to FAQs, for example, really helping the user providing interesting material that is not just a lot of text.
Yeah, for us as well, back to the data point as well. For the bots that we created too at the beginning, there wasn't any data really available. So like went back to other Slack channels and saw what people were saying and collected like the top things people were asking for conferences and trained the bot those things and focus on those top use cases based on that data. But yeah, with top tips, keep testing always, get users involved from the beginning. Do that beta testing so much before launch so that the bot can be trained, but also to see where people are getting stuck, and yeah.
Well, yeah, I totally agree with the testing portion of things, as would everyone. I think another project that I work on concurrently with the chatbot is the artificial intelligence risk framework, and trying to understand from designing to deployment where all the potential risks lie. And because a chatbot, like a lot of the AI systems, is so dynamic, I think one of the key points is continuous monitoring and any sort of alerts and any sort of anomaly detection techniques you can use to find issues with how the chatbot is currently resolving issues. And that's true in like internal company use cases, but even more so when it's a customer-facing chatbot. So that would be, I think, my best practice tip.
Okay, pretty easy. I can just repeat. It's copy, copy, copy when it comes to UX and it comes to the interface. I think that's just far the most important. So I've once heard a pretty nice saying or rhyme. It's so if you don't get the copy right, the conversation won't delight. I think that's so true. So therefore, we, for example, we hired pretty soon in the process a conversational UX designer really focusing on that stuff with a psychological academic background, just focusing on how to ask something at which point. So providing options. We would like to have the options to just talk to a human at some point in time, yeah? To make it clear that there is always an exit from this maybe not so fine conversation already. But besides that, so that's very UX-based, I think the most important is you always have to provide a tangible result, which makes it worthwhile to do all this conversation and this bot stuff, which might not be 100% perfect. So actually, what I have applied, or what we have applied internally, is one very simple test. We always ask ourselves, if I meet somebody, a good friend in a bar, and so he already knows a bit of me and he's willing to listen to me, so would this conversation make sense in this environment? Or would he completely freak out because it's too boring, it's complete nonsense, it's too many iterations? So that's actually, we always ask ourselves, would it make sense or would it be awkward? And we were pretty close to actually, if it works out or not.
Last question, then if we have extra time, we can take questions from the crowd as well. So what does success look like when building a chatbot, and in what instances could it fail?
How could it fail? So you cannot cover the whole domain. You will not ever analyze all the messages correctly. You will get dialogues wrong. So this is just going to happen, as you said. And then it should be clear to the user there is a way out of this, right? Providing, for example, if the user tries to achieve a task that he can also do on your web page, on another forum, then just provide him the link there, right? If it's a customer support bot, then hand off the conversation to a human, right? Really providing exit strategies for the user so that he does not feel trapped. And then still make it easy to transition for the user, right? So if the user has already provided you with a bit of data, then use that data to fill in a form or to inform the customer service agent, okay, this is the user and this is his problem and this is the information he already provided to me. And so even if your bot fails, you should handle that like as smoothly as possible, because users will experience that and you still want to keep these users engaged with your bot and feel kind of satisfied, even if they could not accomplish the whole task within the bot, but at least a part of the process happened in the dialogue.
To add to that too, yeah, we built for the chatbots as well on Slack. We built the back end, so after a couple times of the bot not understanding, a human would be notified with anonymized conversation, so that the user is asked, do you want to speak to a human? Yes, no, connect to that person, they can talk to them. But for more like KPIs of the bot, it's a super broad kind of question. Depends on the bot, like what you're trying to achieve specifically. But I guess just looking back at analytics and making sure those conversations are going smoothly.
Yeah, so a chatbot success can be measured in a lot of ways. We, for NLP engines, obviously we look at accuracy and intent prediction, but that's not the only thing. It has to be about the customer satisfaction, the number of times the user gets diverted from the actual topic, and it's also like the bot personality, and does it align to your organization's values? Does it really reflect well on your organization as well? So all of those have to be in some way tracked and monitored, and those, I think, those success metrics should be defined at the beginning of the design stage. In terms of chatbot failing, I guess it's often in not defining that success metric particularly well, and also, as mentioned, like any sort of scoping issues, focusing on a domain use case, not testing enough, etc.
Yeah, so how to fail? I would say there are hundreds of ways. It's pretty easy. Where's the success? So if you build a conversation, I would say, but it's really focusing on our use case. And many others, I would like to have relevant questions. Not doing the same stupid stuff as I would like to do with a call agent or have to do with a call agency. I think a good way to achieve that is actually to have some metrics in place before starting the project or in the very first beginning. And for example, in our case, we thought in the beginning it makes sense to have the number of questions and round trips, iterations. So if I ask less questions to the customer, it's better, so we thought. That's true to a certain extent, but it's actually not a relevant metric anymore. We found it very soon. People are willing to ask more or reply to more questions, stay longer in the conversation if they feel it's relevant. So we're almost 40 minutes talking here. Somehow feels relevant to you because you're still here. And that's the point in having a conversation. So if it's relevant, if you feel there is a gain in it, in doing that, if you get feedback on what you're saying, then people have no problem, or users have no problem just saying a few questions longer. It's worthwhile for them. Of course, that's not true in every case. If you just want to change your, mobile phone contract, you want to have it done quickly. I'm not wasting your Sunday evening, but for a lot of use cases, they want to engage and they have some meaningful experience. And that's what we tried to with a very concrete metrics and KPI set. So I would really suggest and recommend it very strongly to have tangible metrics in the beginning, not just focusing on technical stuff, but really on the gain for the consumer. What's the value add for the consumer? Boiling down to 1, 3, maybe 10 in the beginning metrics, and then figuring out what is the key metric.
Cool. We have 8.5 more minutes, so if anyone has questions in the crowd, we can answer them. That'll be easy.
Just so we keep order, please just wait until you've received a mic before you ask your question. You've got a mic, you're good.
How do you see the development of chatbots for enterprises and for companies? Like you said, you can use it for customer support, but you're going to use it also for branding, for sales, all the different kinds of things. So what do you think? Will that be successful in the future? And if yes, how would that work in Germany? Because I saw that in America this is very popular, people are all over it, whereas in Germany people are a bit like reserved, if you know what I mean. So what do you think about that?
So there are a lot of different use cases. So let's focus on the customer service use case first. There it really, for a large company, it is really a benefit if they just handle, like, let's say 10% of the conversations with the bot, right? Just handling the simple cases, right? The simple conversations that you've seen like hundreds of times, just handling them like saves a lot of money. Just by reducing the customer service staff, or by not reducing the customer service staff, but by focusing that service staff on more complex problems and spending more time on these issues than on the simple ones, right? So this is where it really is, where you're able to even use chatbots that aren't like as clever as we would like them in customer service, but solving small problems there is just already a big benefit for large companies. And then another use case really is that we've seen and then that we've developed is reaching out to customers that you earlier did not talk to, right? So for example, an insurance company sells contracts that expire after 2 years, and usually a service agent contacts you, asks, do you want to keep your contract, do you want to extend that? But for contracts that only are of small value or aren't that high paying, there's really no value in like talking to them, because you don't have enough stuff to phone everyone. And just contacting them by chatbot and asking them, okay, do you want to extend your contract, or do we want to change it? Having these interactions really is a big benefit for the customer, because he otherwise would have been ignored by the company, but now he gets his face time.
And I think there are a lot of customer-facing use cases, but I think right now the best value for a company is in a lot of the internal use cases, because there are teams like IT service desk, HR, time and expense policy team, or whatever team. They get tons of the exact same questions over and over again. They have to refer them to a section of this policy. And it prevents them from addressing the more urgent questions or doing more value-add activities. So I think it's always about finding that use case where this would be the most valuable, and that's simple queries in large volumes. And in terms of the changing the market, it's always, I think, important to test your chatbot in the market that you're deploying it in. I mean, we had that instance with Microsoft Hey chatbot that went very racist when it was deployed in the US, but it a similar chatbot have been working just fine in Asia for a whole year. So it's always important to check that the use case is appropriate for what you're deploying it for. Next question. Do you want to?
I can just actually comment on that. So on a customer-facing point, I see actually 3 fields. The one is the really taking a very simple customer service case. I think that's actually what we're focusing on today. And next few months, probably we will have there a level which make really sense to the consumer. The second one is probably lead qualification. That's something very important, but it's pretty hard to do. That's actually on a business term what we are doing. We'll do a lead qualification of a very complex product. And the second is something like you mentioned, so marketing, sales automation, automatic follow-ups that I don't need to have sales guys calling another, writing emails, stuff like that, having more interactive version of that. But what really is interesting in niche, and which I don't see today is so much, is on actually internal users or B2B users. And that's interesting because they don't try to break it. They have a very concrete need. They actually know what they want actually, and then I can fulfill it in a very easy way. And so I think there are not really a lot of startups out there focusing on that stuff, but just doing, I don't know, reordering or a bit more complex reordering between businesses, stuff like that. So that absolutely makes sense. I don't need a B2B sales team with this low-level task occupied. That may really make sense, yeah.
Okay. When you end up with long conversations, complex conversations with a lot of intents and things like this, can you recommend a tool that you use, technology-independent tool, you know? It's not dedicated to Alexa or to API, but a tool that you can build some nice graphics out of your conversations, things like this.
Sorry, to create like the graphic view of the conversation?
Yeah, for instance, yeah.
So right now we just use Sketch actually. I created a template actually for Slack on Sketch. Bot Society to actually see the conversation flow is pretty good, but there definitely needs to be more in that area for sure. But yeah, anybody else?
Yeah, I guess for EMILIE, one of the things that we're currently developing is the ability for non-technical users to be able to visualize a conversation more clearly. So what we're working on is a script that can scan a Visio document that all business users know how to use, and then turn that into like a dialogue flow that we can then input into a different API like Watson or Alexa.
Maybe just to get another perspective on that. So if you really want to do complex conversations, so I wouldn't recommend any of that. Because it really gets so messy, you're ending up just maintaining and understanding what you have done before. Working more people on that, it's horrible actually. So we have developed our own part on that and not doing any scripting. But I've seen a lot of very, very complex what's broadcast chatbots, for example. I've seen a lot of IBM Watson chatbots, insights. So it's immense what there is going on, and you need just customizing, people doing all day long conversational design, and it's really hard to get track of what's really done to the user. You have to do a lot of testing, find out what kind of conversational path is taken. It's so hard that it makes sense to the user in the end. So we have done a different approach with data points rather than questions, but it's a very specific use case we are trying to attack there. But just to be aware of that, you can burn a lot of money just trying complex scripts.
I think that's the last of the questions for now. One more round of applause for our excellent panel on chatbots.